Boston Interfaith Organization. The GBIO is a broad-based organization that works for the public good by coalescing, training, and organizing people across religious, racial, ethnic, class, and neighborhood lines. Several months ago, a small group of us came together to consider how we might strengthen connections among local GBIO congregations in the northwest suburbs. Tonight's session, on the theme of building the world as it should be, is the result of those discussions with GBIO team members from Hancock Church, Bethel Temple Center, Temple Isaiah, and Temple Amuna. And so now, before we get started, I have 3 orders of housekeeping business, 3 items. First, we want everyone to know that tonight's session is being recorded so that even those who are not able to attend in person can still join us in the learning. Second, if you haven't already, I'd like you to ask everyone to please silence their cell phones. And thirdly, if you need to find the restrooms, you should go out the exit in this corner of the hall, turn left, go through the double white doors, and then you'll find several restrooms, one on your left and a few more a little bit further down on the right. And now it is my pleasure to introduce one of our hosts, Reverend David Clark from here at Hancock Church, to lead us in the opening prayer.
On behalf of the congregation of Hancock Church and our senior minister, Reverend Dr. Barbara Callahan, I want to welcome you all to our space and thank you for bearing with us as a quarter of our building is under construction. Thank you if you took a new route to find your way around our building this evening, but it's so good to share this space together. For our prayer, our opening prayer this evening, I would like to offer up these words by the Celtic spiritualist John Philip Newell. Would you please join me in a posture of prayer? Holy One beyond all names, eternal wellspring, may love rise again in us today, with food for every table, shelter for every family, and reverence for every life. Forgive us our failings in love and free us from all falseness, that the light of our souls may shine and the strengths of our spirits endure for earth and all her people. May it be so this day, tonight, and forever. Amen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, GBIO. I'm Robin Seitz from Bethel Temple Center. I use she, her pronouns. I'd like to invite our clergy to come up and make yourselves comfortable in one of these seats. Shortly, we'll hear from our panel of clergy. We appreciate how busy they are at this time of year and thank each of them for joining us this evening and hugging each other. Joining us and sharing a bit about your personal history, faith, values, and traditions that call you to work in pursuit of social justice. Their reflections also launch what we hope will be a cycle of ongoing conversations between all of us here. One of my first favorable impressions of the GBIO was many years ago, when I was very pleased that meetings started and ended on time. Time is very precious to all of us. Thus, although our clergy could speak for an extended period of time, we humbly request that their thoughtful remarks also will reflect their utmost respect for our time. Each of our panelists will speak for roughly 3 to 4 minutes. We will start with Rabbi Jonathan Krause of Bethel Temple Center, then Reverend Barbara Callahan from Hancock UCC, followed by Rabbis David Lerner of Temple Amuna and Karen Thomas-Show from Temple Isaiah. So Rabbi Krause, would you start us off? You can do it there or come up here, however you'd like.
I'll go over there. You don't have to figure out the technology. Hi, everybody. Over 20 years ago, a GBIO organizer named Rebecca Gifford came to our temple to talk with me about the possibility of our congregation joining GBIO. Rebecca, as some of you will not be surprised to hear, began by asking me about my personal journey with Judaism and social justice. I suspect I said that I can't really remember a time when my Jewish identity and my understanding of Judaism did not include a commitment to helping others and trying to repair the world, which we call tikkun olam. There was a childhood spent bringing money to religious school each week to help plant trees in Israel, collecting food and money to help feed the hungry, learning, singing, and eventually leading myself songs in Hebrew and English that spoke about our hope for a better world and our obligations as God's partners to help make that so. I almost certainly mentioned to Rebecca that as I grew older, I would listen to my childhood rabbi, Rabbi Israel Dresner of blessed memory, giving fiery, eloquent sermons, very, very long sermons, about what he had learned marching with Dr. King in Selma and in St. Petersburg. And I would also listen to my rabbi castigate American and Israeli politicians from the pulpit whenever he felt they had betrayed the highest shared values of American society and Judaism, not to mention, because he was a historian, the lessons of history. There were marches to advocate for Soviet Jews who were refused the right to leave Russia, and youth group trips to the Reform Movement's Religious Action Center in Washington, D.C., where we not only learned about the Jewish religious values that define our tradition's understanding of justice, but based on those values, we also went up to Capitol Hill to lobby our senators and representatives around legislation that was then current. As a rabbinical student and a rabbi, the lived experiences of those formative years both continued and became much more firmly rooted in the rich, nourishing soil of our tradition. For example, the rabbis are having a debate, definitely not unusual in our tradition, about what is the most important teaching in Judaism. And one of them, a guy named Ben Azai, as it happens, suggests as his choice a teaching from Genesis that all human beings are created in God's image. He said that's the most important one. And I remember thinking, and I still think, that might very well be my choice as well. Seeing every human being as a unique, irreplaceable, incredibly precious, and holy reflection of God immediately obligates us as people of faith to try and treat every human being with a kind of respect, care, love, and reverence that one would, of course, offer God. But this belief in the inherent holiness of every person also obligates us to do everything in our power to make sure that the society we share treats every human being with respect, care, love, and, God willing, even reverence. Our congregation joined GBIO now over 20 years ago because we found both friends and important allies to share this holy work. Whatever different words folks in GBIO use to name God, to describe our sacred human responsibility to care for each other, to talk about our belief that creating a better world is both possible and among our most important human obligations, whatever religious language we use to name all those truths, we are bound together by those shared convictions and by the shared justice work to which they call us. Over these past 20+ years, we have learned that there is not only organizing and political power in these relationships and this larger community, there is also greater inspiration, greater courage, greater wisdom, greater resilience to weather the inevitable setbacks, and the certain knowledge that none of us needs to do this work alone. We have wonderful allies, we have precious friends with whom to share our justice journeys, and that has been and continues to be a blessing beyond words. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I am Barbara Callahan. I'm the senior minister here at Hancock Church. Thanks so much for being here. I come from quite a different background from Rabbi Krause, and not just because we're different faiths, but the type of Christianity that I was raised in was one that very much valued the thought of the afterlife, and to some degree devalued human earthly experience, especially when it came to things like justice. Their human experience was valued in terms of converting people to your understanding of Christianity and in terms of growing what we would call disciples for Christ. But that was really kind of as much as the human experience mattered. That's how I was raised. And that was how I was brought up. And when I was in college, I was the president of a Christian organization that was pretty large and active where I was. We had I was one of the presidents, but in total we had 1,000 students, and we were quite strong. And my senior year, there was an incident on campus that was racist. There were some things that happened, and this was a huge deal on campus. This was in North Carolina. And it was really a flashpoint. A lot was happening around this particular thing. The head of the Black Student Union was a friend, we were very friendly with each other, and she said, "I need to talk to you." And I said, "Okay." And so we met, and she said, "What are you and your organization doing about this?" And I said, "I'm not sure what we have to do with this. I don't understand what this has to do with Christianity or faith in general." And she also was a Christian, raised in a very different tradition than me, in the African American church, and she just looked at me. And she said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, I'm sorry, I really don't get it. I don't know." And I offered my support in other ways. And then the next thing that happened was another student came to me and said, "We need to talk about economic justice." And I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And then this continued with one more issue, which was creation care and stewardship. And again, I was like, what does it matter? I mean, this doesn't matter. Only the afterlife matters, because that's how I had been raised. And needless to say, sort of the scales began to fall off of my eyes through a number of these interactions, and I began to really dive into and question my own theology and how I had been raised, and expanded much of my understanding, so much so that I left that tradition and eventually found the United Church of Christ, which within Protestant Christianity has been a leader in terms of justice issues for a very, very, very long time. And that has been a great home for me, and it's been something within our tradition, within the United Church of Christ. Certainly not every church is in full agreement about everything at all, but there is a pretty strong through line of this is who we are in the world. We are working to bring heaven here to earth, really, the earth, the world as it could be, the idea of the kingdom of God or the kingdom of God being God's values of equality and justice and everyone created in the image of God being made real as much as possible here on earth. And finally, I will say, in terms of working to build power, I'm quite taken with the work of Rabbi Sharon Brous. Yes. And specifically something she said, which is the importance of a progressive interfaith coalition to stem the tide of authoritarianism, that indeed that has been the thing that throughout history has been one of the main reasons that authoritarianism is ever dissuaded is because of an interfaith progressive coalition. Thank you.
I want to start with some singing. If you know it, you can join in with me. You might not know it, but it's easy to learn. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the union. You can just clap. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union till the day I die. There are verses. We won't sing the whole thing. But as I think about my journey, that's how it started. I was a toddler. My dad, who was a rabbi, sang this song to me, among other union songs. And so he's also sang Jewish songs. And so I internalized at a very young age that that's what you do. You stand up for those people, for those who are the underdog. He would drill this in also when we watched a sporting event in which we didn't have a vested interest. You always rooted for the underdog. And you rooted for the union. You rooted for those who had less power. And that was just obvious. It wasn't even something I really thought about or learned. That was what it meant to be a human being, certainly what it meant for me as a Jew. And that instinct really is my justice journey, and it's throughout my life. Many of the same experiences that Rabbi Krauss spoke to. Soviet Jewry standing up for them when they were denied the right to leave Russia in the 80s. Ethiopian Jewry trying to build bridges between blacks and Jews in college, in Chicago, working for issues of economic and housing justice for those who needed it. Coming here, one of my first projects was to get about 40 people on a plane to go to a rally in DC for Darfur. And I got my 4-year-old son and my 1-year-old daughter on, and it was all perfect until we forgot that we need car seats in DC, but I won't tell you what happened. I think those interfaith coalitions are absolutely key. One of the ones I've been working on the most is gun violence. Today, another school shooting. I feel like it's hard work. We've done through Leica so many vigils over the years, so many times we came together to raise awareness. I worked with an organization, Clergy Against Bullets, had a simple goal: ban 30 bullet cartridges from convenience stores. Couldn't get that done. But we did get Scott Brown to cast the deciding vote to not have reciprocal conceal and carry law, which is to this day my greatest success. But too many funerals, too many things like we don't even hear thoughts and prayers. We have nothing. Very sad. I've worked to try to build bridges with the Muslim community. Sadly, the last 2 years have undone a lot of that work. But I really believe that those interfaith partnerships and relationships are among the most meaningful work that I've done and among the most meaningful relationships that I have, especially with the clergy here and beyond. I think we are living in a very frightening, scary, unusual time in American history and in world history. And we have such divisiveness politically, religiously, that we are all called upon to work harder. And we need organizations like the GBIO to do this work. I've been working with this interfaith group, Prayers for Liberty, to stand up against real threats that I believe are happening to our democracy, a move to authoritarianism that's really frightening. For me, activism has never been on the side, but it's been something that's essential. There's a great teacher in the year 100, Rabbi Tarfon, who says, you have to do this work. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor velo ata ben chorim libatel mimenu, he says in Hebrew. You might not be able to finish it, but you can never desist from it. You have to keep working at it. And I learned that the only way to have that be sustained is by having partners, is that you're here, that we can reach out to someone else, meet with them one-on-one, form those coalitions in partnership. And that energy, that enthusiasm, that work, that gives me hope. And I find strengths in so many different insights. I learned so much from Reform Judaism, so much from the UCC Church. I could pick many, many other faiths and streams, religious streams. We need to stand shoulder to shoulder. We need to build religious coalitions at a time where we don't find voices of moderation, of kindness, of justice in the world. And I pray that we can do that. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and well done to my colleagues. It's so meaningful to hear each of your stories and what motivates you, and thank you, everyone, for being a part of this tonight. I'm going to tell a brief story that really underscores for me what justice is about and what I feel called toward. It will absolutely illuminate one of the principles of my tradition. And I also wanted to say, and perhaps this is true, in fact, I'm sure it's true of my Christian colleagues, but they say of rabbis that we each have one sermon and we give it in 1,000 different ways. And you have 3. Okay, that's wonderful. But I've realized over the years that actually this story is what I often speak to. And so I think it's fitting for me. When I was in rabbinical school, I went to the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, the Reform Rabbinical Seminary, and I was in my 4th year, so I was kind of getting along there, and it was in 2006 that I was a rabbinic fellow, a rabbinical student fellow, for a conference called the Consultation on Conscience. It was sponsored by the Religious Action Center, which is the Reform Movement's social justice political lobby arm in DC. And really, they just wanted to have a lot of rabbinical students go, so they paid for us to go, and it was an amazing opportunity, and all we had to do was show up to every single program. And so one of the programs was on the last evening, and it was at a synagogue, a beautiful synagogue, Washington Hebrew Congregation in Washington, D.C. And the panel was a discussion on stem cell research. And in 2006, that was a big deal, to stem cell research. Where was it going to go, and was it ethical, and what are the justice issues? And on the panel, I only remember 2 of the individuals. I know that there were 3. One was Michael J. Fox. He's a Reform Jew and also someone who has benefited from stem cell research with his own Parkinson's. He spoke of his own personal journey. The second person was Rabbi Susan Talvey, who's a Reform rabbi colleague from St. Louis. And she has a daughter who also benefited because of a childhood illness from stem cell research. And the third person was a physician and a researcher who did a lot of excellent work in stem cell research. And I loved the evening, and I was so motivated by it. I'd never been so inspired to get involved in a cause. But I was so hurt by something. When you're in school, you can be hurt by things. You get older and you realize it's not your business to be hurt by anything. But I was hurt because I felt that there was a 4th seat that should have been on the dais. And that 4th seat, to me, was the person that had absolutely nothing to do with stem cell research, but felt that it was an important cause because they have a humanitarian interest or a religious interest or you name the values. And from that moment, I was dedicated to looking up Jewish texts about why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And I was drawn, by way of concluding my presentation, I was drawn to the texts in early Genesis about Abraham, who advocated on behalf of the individuals or the citizens, if you will, of Sodom and Gomorrah, and said, "Oh God, will you sweep away the innocent with the guilty?" And there's a whole story there that I imagine most of us know. But what struck me when I was reading it was that, yes, Abraham had a nephew who lived in those areas, but those weren't Abraham's neighborhoods. And I felt in that moment like that's why I was hurt, because we have a responsibility for justice, not only when it affects us personally, but perhaps like your story, Reverend Callahan, when someone else who we're in relationship with is also hurting or under attack or doesn't need to speak for themselves alone, we have a responsibility. And that's how I look at a lot of justice issues. Both, I think there should be people at the table who are affected directly and who also are part of the expertise and solution. But I also think it's so important that those of us who also can be advocates and partners also show up to the table as well. And that's what motivates me both for my tradition and for my personal experience. Thank you.
I thank you all. And now, Wendy, it's your turn. If you'd like to, it's okay. You want to say it? Wait, you want to go down?
All right. You guys are all from the same office?
They can.
Your pick.
You do as, we want you to be what you lead like right now?
Let's sit down now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Tamasho. Good evening. My name is Wendy Tanahashi Works, and first I, then actually David Landis, is going to share the story from Steve Quattrano from Temple Imuna, who's sick. I'm going to share, as well as David Landis, some experience that we have with GBIO. I've been a member of Hancock for 22 years. Hancock joined GBIO in 2018, and soon after, I became one of Hancock's representatives to GBIO. I recall my first GBIO gathering. I was moved by the members sharing their personal stories about healthcare struggles. Their voices touched my heart, and I knew I wanted to be a part of this work. Soon after I joined GBIO's healthcare team, which felt deeply personal for me. My middle daughter faced years of challenges accessing mental health care, and I experienced the frustration of an insurance-driven system and too few providers. Together, my daughter and I shared our stories at assemblies, GBIO assemblies, including Rise Up for Healing action in November of 2019, with over 800 GBIO members present and lots of legislators. What moved me the most was hearing other stories about mental health and health in general. And also, Senate President Spilka and Secretary Sutters responded by sharing their own connections to mental health. In that moment, I saw the power of stories, not only to move our hearts, but to move policy. 10 days after this action, the Massachusetts Senate passed the Pharmaceutical Access Cost and Transparency Act, called PACT. We and our stories at GBIO and our hard work and our listening campaigns are what helped make that go, make that move and pass. These are our stories. They came from our lives, our families, and our communities. We don't need to explain why healthcare reform is necessary. You can hear it in our voices. Each story carries struggle, frustration, and hope. Together, they create a mosaic of voices, reminding us that change is not only needed, but it is urgent. These stories are the foundation of our actions, voices we hear and carry with us long after the campaigns are done, as do the legislators. That same year, at another big meeting, GBIO adopted the refounding proposal. Its goal was to increase diversity and more accurately reflect Boston's demographics. For me, this reinforced GBIO's transparency and humility. Its willingness to acknowledge who was missing and to ensure these communities were well represented. Through hard work, a lot of listening campaigns, and reconfiguring leadership, GBIO brought new voices to the forefront. Along the way, I've continued to learn many leadership and organizing skills. And as an educator, as a middle school teacher, I love this because this keeps me challenged as a learner. GBIO pushes me out of my comfort zone, whether it's public speaking, like right now, it's not my comfort zone, running meetings or collaborating with leaders across congregations and greater Boston communities. Both experiences, the healthcare experience and campaign and the refounding, showed me that what makes GBIO unique. We build power through our stories, We make space for all voices, and together we create real change. GBIO works together across faith communities, racial and economic divides. Our voices unite for the common good, for a better world, for a world as it should be. Thank you. And now I will introduce David.
Thank you, Wendy. One of our team, Steve Cotrano, is not feeling well tonight, so he was going to be speaking about his experience. And so you can tell the difference. I've never seen Steve wear a tie, so now I get to be Steve. Thank you, Wendy, in Steve's voice. I'm Steve Cotrano. Thank you for having me speak tonight. I've been a member of Temple Amuna since 1994, more than 30 years now. Until recently, however, I have not been involved in volunteering in any kind of community service for a number of reasons. It sounds silly, but I never really knew how to get started. It felt disingenuous and kind of awkward. It just didn't feel authentic. But then I attended a Zoom call sometime in the winter of 2023 or 2024, I believe. Jonina Schoenfeld was reporting on the work she was doing with the GBIO campaign on the part of the Housing Justice campaign on the part of housing. I was so impressed with the thought that had gone into the campaign, I wrote to Jonina. I explained that, from my point of view, housing inequities were the basis of, or at least indirectly related to, every social problem in our society. She agreed and invited me to attend the rally at the State House. The State House action, as it is called, was significant for me on several levels. It was immediately apparent to me that GBIO leaders had carefully selected a very few objectives at the state level that were both significant and achievable. They also understood the legislative process and how to engage thousands of our neighbors to influence outcomes. The goals they defined were pragmatic, incremental, and politically feasible. And perhaps most importantly, I could see how disciplined they were in their messaging, to focus clearly on a moral argument that any organized religious tradition could support, nonpartisan, but definitely values-based political position, that everyone deserves a home. It was brilliant. I looked around me and noticed that many, if not most, of those in attendance did not look like me. That is, white, straight, male, older, and privileged. You can tell the difference. The similarity, excuse me. And certainly didn't come from Lexington. I engaged those around me and was absolutely delighted, thrilled even, to find friendly, informed, and engaged neighbors from metropolitan Boston, people I just never would have met in any other forum. I noticed, obviously, this is not something I could accomplish on my own. The organizations and institutions behind this are fundamental. A year later, and months after the end of the housing campaign, I can honestly say that many of the connections I made during the campaign have become friends. What started out as more transactional relationships around an issue have become more durable relationships based on shared values and common interests. It's very clear to me that we are building trust and understanding across our mostly segregated communities, experiences, and familiarity that are essential for working together to preserve the religious and democratic institutions so essential to our democratic government, society, and culture. In a time of escalating hostility, misinformation, authoritarianism, and even violence, this work is helping keep me sane. The work has deepened my connection with Temple Amuna, with the Temple Amuna community as well. We are, in fact, building relational power that transcends single issues, that spans our faith communities and unites our city. It has become increasingly clear to me as the importance of these relationships grows in my estimation. I have had this opportunity only because of GBIO and also because of my Temple Amuna connection with that organization. And I am grateful. And so I'm doing this work both for myself and for my community at Amuna, and also for my neighbors in Metro Boston who are committed to building a more just community, moving the world incrementally from the way it is to the way it should be. Thank you. Hello. Thank you, Wendy and Steve. I'm David Landis from Temple Amuna. I use he, his pronouns. And now I have the pleasure and honor and daunting task to try and teach you a little bit more about what is special about organizing. There are, of course, many ways to make the world better and more just. Elliot's going to turn on a slide. You also have this on your engagement card. Have a look at that. This, I think, is one of the core pictures of community organizing. I'm going to focus on three: service, activism, and organizing. Each of them is important, and none of them are exclusive. I suspect that each of you does a little bit of the first two, service and activism, and tonight, whether you know it or not, you are engaged in the last. Tonight, we are organizing. Service. Service is personal and needed. It is good and right to make a pot of soup for someone who is ill or donate clothes to those who are cold. Similarly, it is good and right to march and to protest. Sometimes the powers that be need to hear the voice of the people. Yet each of these, service and activism, do not change the power structure that has led to injustice or inequity. When the soup has been finished, there is still hunger, and systemic inadequacies in healthcare and social support still exist. When the march is over and folks go home, a policy or change is either moved forward or it is not, but the system and power structures that led to that problem remain unchanged. Organizing is different. For sure, it is slower and requires a more sustained effort. Yet when done well, it changes the power structures that have led to or reinforce injustice. You've heard about our recent campaign, the Housing Justice Campaign. At the celebration to mark the end of the GBIO's recent Housing Justice Campaign that Steve just mentioned, we heard, and Wendy mentioned, we heard a state official in the legislature who worked for the state government report that she had been in several meetings where people asked, would the GBIO be happy with this number or that number? Okay? Even though we were not in the room, the voice for the way the world should be, the voice where people have the voice for people wanting to have, the voice for people having affordable housing and where state-owned housing is not in shameful disrepair was in the room. GBIO power was in the room with the decision makers, so the power dynamic had changed. Now, frankly, many of us are uncomfortable talking about power, especially since we tend to think about power as dominant power, power over, power that is a no-sum game. Yet in organizing with the GBIO, we build a different kind of power, something we call relational power. Now, this is not power over, this is power with. We build relational power through relationships with others with whom our interests align. Further, as Steve and Wendy described, this power built on stories, built on relationships, endures beyond any campaign or issue. So now, friends, in that brief time, you have learned two of my favorite organizing principles. We build power with, not power over. And secondly, issues lead to tasks. Relationships lead to power. Now, before we delve a little bit deeper into how we build relational power, let me just add a little something about how this work, this organizing work, relates to the abuses of federal power that we all witnessed right now. Right? Many of us feel like the house is burning and something has to be done. Admittedly, the GBIO focuses on regional work. Yet there are moments when we mobilize our base and use our power to fight federal issues. Again, organizing and activism are not exclusive. Yet when we do this, we do it with care, with intention, but we do it grounded in relationships. Relationships with one another, relationships with our partner organizations who may be deeper in the fight of something, one particular issue, and crucially, based on relationships with those who are most affected by this injustice. Now, in a moment, we're going to build some relational power even more here. We do this by meeting with someone with curiosity to discover where our interests align. In the lingo, we call this a one-to-one. Usually a one-to-one is an intentional meeting. You call up someone and try and meet someone with whom you would want to build a public relationship. At the core of any one-to-one is the task of learning what drives your partner. You want to explain for yourself and to learn from your partner of some very core questions. Why are you here? Why do you care? Right? And because this is the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, there's another core question that I think that ought to come up in any GBIO one-to-one, and that is, where is God, faith, or your covenantal community in this work for you? Steve spoke very powerfully about the connections he's made, as Wendy as well. My story is that I think that happens because even though we come to this work from different traditions, we come to it faith adjacent. We come to it motivated in our way, in this way, and that breaks down all kinds of barriers and builds all kinds of trust. Okay, so now you all have been sitting very still for a moment. We're going to get ready for some one-to-one. So to do that, I'm going to ask each of you to get up, look around the room, find someone who you do not know. Maybe you've noticed them from around town, someone from a different community, someone from your community. Take two chairs and find a little bit of a space where you can pair up, okay? We're gonna just get up, do that, and once everyone has a partner, it's not like kickball, find someone, and then we will get back together once we find that everyone is connected. We can have you line up one-to-one if you want. Everybody, 2 minutes, please. 2 minutes, so. Okay, friends, I'm sorry to do that. Sorry to do this. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm really sorry to do that. Before before I turn over to Elliot Gimbel from Temple Isaiah, before you move, just everyone stop for 1 second. And if you can, listen to your ears for a moment. Right? Just listen back a moment to that joyful buzz that was going on a moment ago before we stopped. And I just want to alert you to that, because that, frankly, is my favorite moment of all this organizing work. Right? That interested, joyful, connected buzz of people getting to know one another and building connection, and then together building relationships and power. But so just here, Rabbi Lerner started with a song. I want you to take another song home with you, which is the song of those voices all around us. Take that home. So passing off to Elliot Gimbel, please, to talk about what's next.
The buzz is back. I'm Elliot Gimbel from Temple Isaiah. I use he, him pronouns, and I want to make sure we stay on time. So the big question is, what's next? And I really want to, again, thank the clergy and all of you for your stories tonight and for being here tonight. Powerful and a shot in the arm. But if we just tell stories, that's not really going to be enough, because we want to move forward. So how do we use our relational organizing to actually get things done? And GBIO builds its power over time, and believe it or not, there's a method to this work. Right now, we're near the beginning of our organizing cycle, which you have on your card and you can kind of see here. And I want to sort of tee that up a little bit. One of the things we do is we listen to each other. We have house meetings. We hear what people are worried about, thinking about, what keeps them up at night. Why do they care? What do they care about? Then we move on to, and this fall we'll be hosting housing meetings, house meetings, to identify what's important to us and to identify leaders for our next campaign. From there, we gather those stories that speak to the issues, and we'll do research on power and who the leaders are, and do a bit of a power analysis as we start to coalesce around some of the issues that we're hearing about, so we can reasonably make a positive difference and figure out how. Then we'll take action, educating and gathering our members and legislative representatives, visiting Beacon Hill and others, targeting legislators and policymakers with our specific asks. So as you can see, we're kind of narrowing things down to something specific that's winnable, that's deeply felt, so that we can actually try and make some positive change. Doesn't always work, but the goal is to try and win as much as we can for the world. And we, after we do these actions, and we, the reactions to those asks, the reaction and the change will help us inform our steps forward. Let's say we're in the middle of a legislative session. They say, not right now. We'll keep going and we'll figure out strategies to keep going before the end of the legislative session, as we did last time on our housing campaign with some success. And at the conclusion of a campaign, we evaluate, try and learn what went well, what's next, and where we can improve. So that's, in a nutshell, the next couple of years, really, of a typical campaign. Not set in stone, but you get the idea. So as you can gather from what others have said tonight, community organizing builds something more durable than the campaign itself. We don't disappear after the vote. Issues are rarely resolved with one piece of legislation or one vote. Yet we can move things forward, and our success speaks to that. So tonight you've taken a step to build our communal strength by being here and connecting with others in your congregation and across congregations, whether you're members of GBIO or not. And moving forward, we invite you to build on this and deepen your connections with those in your congregation, in your community, and with the larger entire GBIO. On Sunday evening, October 5th, at Union United Methodist Church in the South End, there's going to be a gathering of the entire GBIO community to learn what is next as we move forward in our organizing cycle and begin a listening campaign. It's called a Delegates Assembly, and we'll have everybody from different congregations come together and talk about this listening campaign to kick things off. So you're all invited to that, which brings me to the engagement card that you found on your seat this evening. Take a minute or two to fill that out, and I'm going to go over that real quick. If anyone needs one, we'll get you one. Or if anyone needs a pencil, David's got those. And Robin, can you just give me the next slide, please? Just hit the front arrow. There you go, thanks. So briefly, check the first box if you're interested in getting more involved in any way with your congregation's GBIO core team. And if you're not in a member congregation, we can connect you to a team. We also invite you to schedule a one-to-one with someone here tonight. You've had one with somebody here tonight, but if you'd like to do another one, with your permission, we'll share name and email, and we'll do a spreadsheet, and people will be able to go in and edit it to sort of say, okay, we've set one up already. You can just pick somebody randomly, and then set that up either in person or on Zoom, or a phone call. So again, if you give us your permission on that, we'll get a sheet together and we can keep this going. Finally, let us know if you want to be included on group transportation communications about the Delegates Assembly. Attending that's a great way to learn more about how GBIO works, meet a diverse group of wonderful activists, and tap into some of the really positive energy you felt here tonight, even more so. Kind of this energy even more amped up. After you complete the card, just leave it on your seat. We'll pick it up and get back to you. And now I will give you a few minutes for that. Where's Barbara? Is Barbara here? Oh, there she is. And now I want to turn it over to Barbara Neustadt from Temple Emunah to close us in prayer.
I'm honored to be standing in front of all of you. Thank you all so much for being here this evening. I will bring home that sound, the music of all of us talking and learning about each other. Thank you, David. Thank you, Hancock Church, for hosting us. And thank you to GBIO for creating an absolutely amazing organization. So I'm honored to have been asked to give the final or the closing blessing, the closing prayer. Tonight, we have come together in unity. We hold the truth that we are all created as equals. We listen to each other with compassion and without judgment. Together we hold the truth that the pursuit of justice for all is paramount. May our journey through these challenging times open our hearts and our souls to the injustice, pain, and suffering that so many are experiencing. May we embrace the fulfillment of working together in unity as we walk this road holding hands. And may we know that we all carry within us a spark of light from the divine. And let us say amen.